What's up, everybody? My name is Jackson Fuller, and you are listening to the second episode of Hoggin the Mic. I'll be joined by Andrew Hutchinson momentarily to discuss the past week of Arkansas Razorback sports. And it was a week that started with so much optimism and finished with one loud thud Saturday afternoon, when the Hogs basketball team got boat raced by Auburn inside Walton Arena. We'll discuss that embarrassing loss and really where Arkansas goes from here, along with some more transfer portal talk from the football program. And hey, we've even got some baseball news to get excited about. Lord knows the Arkansas fans need some optimism in their lives. Hopefully the baseball program can deliver on that this spring. Thank you so much to everyone who listened to our debut episode and all of you tuning in now for this second episode. We're hoping to build something here, and we appreciate all the support. With all that said, let's jump into another installment of Hoggin the Mic. Hutch, man, how's it going? Good weekend. Were you able to emotionally recover from what you watched on Saturday afternoon inside Bud Walton Arena? Really a tough scene there in the second half.
Yeah, that was quite ugly, to put it lightly. But hey, at least Bud Walton got to wash that out of its mouth with the women's team coming in and beating Georgia by 40 the next day. That was I don't know how many times we've seen a 32-point blowout in a men's game followed by a 40-point blowout in the women's game back to back in the same building like that before. But man, that the men's game on Saturday was just atrocious, to put it lightly. And I know you don't maybe fully grasp just the severity of how that was, but I mean you wrote it probably. It's the worst loss in Bud Walton history, and typically Arkansas does not lose like that. I mean, it was probably the worst performance I've ever seen in there, and I remember the Stan Heath and John Pelfrey era. So it was not pretty, and they got to somehow find a way to put that behind them. And I'm not nearly as optimistic as I was last week when we recorded the podcast.
Yeah, we'll kind of get to that. Both of us said we still had faith that they were going to be an NCAA tournament team at the end of the year. Not so sure anymore about that one, but let's first a quick recap. Arkansas loses 83-51 Saturday to number 25 Auburn, who is a great basketball team. I think Bruce Pearl has done a terrific job kind of building them for SEC play. They weren't really supposed to be one of the top three teams in the league coming into the season, but they're probably at least the second or third deepest team in terms of just how many guys they bring off the bench and how much talent they have. But the game was tied 27-27 with 3:52 remaining in the first half, and then Auburn just completely dominated the rest of the way. I mean, what the heck, from your vantage point, like what happened? What happened that, Arkansas can be right there, tie game, and then all of a sudden the wheels fall off and Auburn runs away?
This has been an issue throughout the season, the end of the first half. And I asked, Eric Musselman about it because it's happened so many times. I think I looked it up during the game. It's been like 6 times where after the final media timeout of the first half, they just let go of the rope. It didn't matter against Gardner Webb or whoever it was they did earlier in the season. It went from a 10-point lead to a 5-point lead and they run away in the second half. But if you do that against a good team, like in Auburn, then you're gonna get beat, and that's what happened. I mean, as you said, they were right there. It was tied. I think they actually had a 1-point lead at the final media timeout. So I mean, it was, and then they ended up trailing by 7, and then getting blown out in the second half. And I don't know what it is that is causing that, but I mean, we could talk about so many different areas of where they struggle. I mean, Eric Musselman put it perfectly at the end of his press conference after the game. I mean, his little mini rants going on about, we could go around the room and everyone could pick an area, and we stunk. And that was very, very accurate. I mean, they couldn't play defense. They couldn't function on offense. And it was just all around just a horrible, horrible performance. And I don't even know where really to begin on what they could do to fix those issues.
Yeah. First off, just want to say I know some people on the old X Twitter sphere thought that the media was offended by Musselman's rant. Not in the slightest. I think we all appreciated the optimism. We understand he's frustrated and he doesn't want to, he doesn't like having to answer these questions. But we were not offended by any means. More happy that he gave us that sound bite and that quote. But it's tough to, I think, shout out to Tom Murphy of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. He was sitting a couple seats down from me during the game, and he was pointing out during the first half, like, hey, Arkansas is tied, but all their shots are like Keon Minifield step back threes. They're making these difficult shots at the end of the shot clock, and Auburn was consistently getting to the paint. And that advantage didn't really play itself out until the second half, and then I think Auburn won the paint battle like 48-18, something like that. I mean, they won by at least 25 points inside the paint. There's the problems that Musselman has preached about all season: a lack of being able to stop teams off the dribble, and an interior presence where like they're blocking a lot of shots, but they're also giving up a lot of shots at the rim. I mean, both of those things just came right to the forefront and slapped everybody that's an Arkansas supporter in the face. Like, oh, when we play the best teams on our schedule, this is going to be a legitimate issue. You say, like, where do they go from here, and what comes next? And let's kind of, I guess I was a little lower on my podcast outline today, but I think we have to talk about, like, what are some potential solutions for this team. Like you say, you don't know. I don't really know. I think that there's one thing that I could see is just like there has to be more emphasis on getting Khalif Battle, and Devontae Davis going. I think, neither of those players have been overly consistent this season, but when they are playing well, Arkansas plays well. So instead of, quick hooks and not starting them and really game to game not defining their role, maybe they have to be, more of a centerpiece of this team, especially on the offensive end. And I don't know if that solves things, but that's just one idea I had, because when you look back at this season, when those two guys play well, Arkansas plays well. So maybe there's a solution there, but I know Musselman all season, though, hasn't had that kind of trust in this team. He's not letting guys play through their mistakes. What do you think about that? Is there anything else that comes to your mind maybe for where Arkansas can go from here?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You say not letting players play through their mistakes, and that's something that Eric Musselman has kind of prided himself on, in the last few years. Is that's why he kind of shortens his rotation and lets guys play a lot of minutes. Is like, hey, I don't want these guys worried about the quick hook. I don't want them worried about, are they going to come to the bench if they make a mistake? And it hasn't really played out that way. And I don't know if that's because they have so many different pieces. Now, all they're very inconsistent pieces. But I do think Devo is probably the key to this team having success. I mean, he's not an NBA player probably, and he's not an All-American by any means, but he is a very good college player who has been here for 4 years. He's played in the NCAA tournament. He's played on the biggest stage. He's played in SEC play and had a lot of success in SEC play. So I don't know why he's so inconsistent. I mean, he had his best game of the year against UNC Wilmington, and then doesn't start and plays just horribly in the Auburn game. And I mean, even Jimmy Dykes called him out during the broadcast, saying how he was a no-show. And honestly, he was exactly right. So they've got to get Devo going, if not offensively, which he's fully capable of doing. We saw that last year during a pretty critical stretch of SEC play. He was a dominant offensive player, something that just completely surprised me. But then defensively, there were defensive lapses by him last night or against Auburn that I was just like, what is this? This is not Devo Davis that we know. So I don't know if there's something going on there. I would love to ask Eric Musselman about that. Maybe not right after a loss where he's just going to say everything sucked. But it's just something's going on there. If they could get him going, then maybe they can salvage something of this season. But otherwise, when your senior leader like that isn't playing well, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, so I don't have the experience that you guys have of watching Devo kind of thrive. I mean, I saw it in the NCAA tournament against Kansas last year, but on a week-to-week, night-to-night basis in the SEC, I don't really have that. And it kind of strikes me that maybe he just is uncomfortable in his role this season, that he, like, all the newcomers around him, clearly Musselman, like, was playing with pieces and trying to see what he had, thinking that Devo was a reliable guy that would always show up when he needed him. And that's it's probably fair for Musselman to think that way, but at the same time, you got to let your guys be themselves. And I think that there has been too many times this season Devo and maybe even Trevin Brazil have been deferring a little bit to, KB, Tremont Mark, now Keon Menafield. And it's tough because those guys have all five of those guys that I just mentioned have had their moments this season, but none of them have been consistent enough. Menafield's only played 4 games and he was pretty good against Auburn, but he wasn't, you could tell like some of those shots that he was making against UNCW weren't going down against Auburn for whatever reason. I don't know. I think it's if they're going to turn it around, I personally think it starts with Devo. I said this last podcast. I'm a huge fan of Khalif Battle just because of the type of offense like explosiveness he can provide. But it is becoming a little obvious to me that there's a certain lack of trust and a definite lack of consistency there with his offensive game. So I think that Musselman's got to find a way to start getting Devo more consistent, more a fulcrum of this team. One thing I will say that I maybe changed my mind a little bit coming out of this Auburn game is all season I've kind of been under the impression that while the defensive issues have been there and that they need to clean that this team's biggest issues have been on the offensive end to me coming like all season pretty much, where they're not getting enough easy baskets, and then when they do miss, that negatively affects their defense. They don't get to set it up. But I'm starting to kind of lean towards maybe I was wrong and maybe Musselman was right just based off what I saw defensively from Arkansas on Saturday. Of course, they did only score 51 points, so the offense is kind of a train wreck still. What do you think? What's more concerning to you at this point of the season, the Arkansas offense or the defense?
I'm right there with you with the defense because that's what Eric Musselman has hung his hat on. I mean, you go back and look. I mean, Eric Musselman has good defenses, and that's what they've been able to grind out some ugly games in the past just because they were so good defensively. And we did not see that at all against Auburn. I mean, guys were just getting to the basket really easy, getting into the paint. Guys would just drive, and they were just no defense at all. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, I could provide better defense than that, and that's not much of an exaggeration. And so I think the defense has been the issue. Is it something that they can fix? I'm not sure. I know Eric Musselman's going to try his hardest to do that. I keep thinking back to a couple of years ago. Arkansas had a really bad back-to-back showing on the road against LSU and Alabama. They lost to Alabama by like 30. And then I think they lost. I can't remember which one was first. Either LSU, they lost by like 15 or 20. And then I lost to Alabama by 30. One of those was first and the other one. But then after the first loss, Eric Musselman had the team go through this just brutal practice, weighted vests. I mean, it's kind of an infamous practice under Eric Musselman. And they ended up getting blown out the next game. But then after that, they won like 12 straight games or like 12 of 13. And that kind of really sprung them to an Elite Eight run. And I wonder if they need something like that in practice to just really drive home the fact, like, come on. I mean, they're better than what they've shown. I mean, because we know Devo can defend. He's done it. We know Tremont Mark can defend. He's done it. But they're getting beat. And so I feel like that's maybe the area that they could potentially improve unless they just completely let go of the rope and quit on the season. And, only time will tell if that's what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned them potentially quitting on the season. I mean, there's still so much to go in the SEC. I don't think they'll quit. Keon Menafield admitted by his own words that they quit on on Saturday against Auburn, but there's just so many games, so many opportunities left. But this was the type of result that builds scar tissue. There's going, the next time that they're tied and a team goes on a run, a 5-10 point run and builds a lead, I mean, they're going to think back to this game. It's just human nature to do that. And I think the most disheartening thing about everything that happened Saturday is that Bud Walton Arena, not necessarily the fortress maybe under this team that it had been in years past. I mean, they already have a loss to UNC Greensboro. I know the Duke result was terrific at home, and the place was bumping against UNC Wilmington. It was a great environment Saturday against Auburn, but we said we thought they would be able to take care of business at home, and I don't think we can assume that anymore. So, Hutch, where do you how optimistic are you? Let's same question we had last week. Just what's your level of optimism for this team figuring it out, getting stuff sorted? I'm pretty low. I think that, you know, unless they go, I said it last week that they needed to go 2-1 on this 3-game stretch. If they lose one of these next 2 away games, I don't really see how they can turn things around and make the tournament. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm much less optimistic than last week. I mean, at this point, it's like, can they make the NIT? I mean, it's that's how low my optimism has gone right now. Is just that they just. I mean, think about what they went 9-4 in the non-conference play, and they were like number 90 something in the net rankings before the Auburn game. So I mean, they needed to do some damage in SEC play. I mean, if they go 8-10 in conference play, you're in the NIT. I don't even know if they make the NCAA tournament 9-9. So they've got to really get it in gear if they're going to do it. And I don't know if it's going to happen because we've seen it now. We're 14 games in and just has not looked good in those 14 games. And can they get it figured out these last 17? Maybe. Maybe Eric Musselman pulls a rabbit out of his hat, but I'm certainly not holding my breath if that happens.
Shoot, I think they have to win 11 games, honestly, in the SEC to like just how far low they are. Um, it's great. There's great competition in the SEC, but they have some bad results on that schedule now. Losing to UNC Greensboro, getting blown out by Auburn. That UNC Wilmington win looks a lot less impressive now. If like this, the Seahawks have lost their first 2 games of conference play. They're going to need a lot of help, and if the only way to kind of control their own destiny, I think, is to get to that 11-12 win threshold in the SEC. And it can happen. I mean, they're going to have plenty of opportunities. They're going to play Kentucky twice. They got Tennessee. Um, they're going to play Ole Miss, who I know lost to Tennessee this weekend, but still is going to be would be a good win. There's chances, but it's certainly not looking good right now. So let's turn things over to maybe a little more optimistic outlook for the football program before we get to a very optimistic outlook on the baseball program. But yeah, let's start with Sam Pittman and those boys. The Arkansas football team had a really good recruiting weekend. Hutch, the Hogs landed 3 commitments out of the transfer portal. South Alabama defensive back Marquise Robinson, Utah running back Jaquindon Jackson, and Albany defensive end Anton Ukaj, I think. Do you know how to pronounce that last name, Hutch?
I do not. I haven't talked to him yet.
Okay, I think I'm assuming my diverse world profile living in London. I think it's Ukaj, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Anyways, all 3 of those guys committed to Coach Pittman on Friday, actually, and this was an exciting day, I think. We talked a little bit about how Arkansas has raided the Mountain West and the transfer portal there's some potential, but also some potential for some duds out of the portal. This, I think, was a really great day, especially Jackson and Ukaj, the running back and defensive end, which, any of those 3 guys make you particularly excited?
I think Jackson's probably the most exciting just because he's a running back and you can really see his impact. You saw the stats he put up at Utah. He's coming from the Pac-12, which was a very good conference this past season. So, I mean, that's got to be the most exciting from a fan perspective. But I'm not going to lie, the Albany defensive ends really intrigues me because, that's the same school that produced Jared Verse, that was a All-American, I think, at Florida State, probably going to be a first-round draft pick. Arkansas was a player for him as well before he chose Florida State. So I don't know if they're creating some inroads at Albany. I don't know. But that is a big pickup. You need somebody on the other side of Landon Jackson. You've got you're losing Trajan Jeffcoat. You do have you're losing Zach Williams. I think you do have Nico DeVilliers back. Trying to think of the rest of the depth chart there. So I mean, you got some decent pieces, but if you can have a Landon Jackson with the Albany defensive ends, Anton, you said you I don't know how we're gonna pronounce. I'll call him Anton.
Yeah.
He put up monster numbers at the FCS level. Could he have a John Ridgeway type effect? John Ridgeway came to Arkansas as a defensive tackle from Illinois State and, built himself up to be an NFL draft pick. If they can get a similar type impact from Anton, then I think that would be tremendous for Arkansas's defensive line.
I agree. He's the one. I mean, you mentioned those monster stats: 15 sacks, 21.5 tackles for loss, and he forced 5 fumbles last year. Don't really care what level of football you're playing at. That's dominant numbers. That shows you're ahead above the guys that you're going up against on a week-to-week basis. And Arkansas, I don't really think Arkansas needed another running back, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think having that added depth is a good thing. We saw that room kind of get hit with some injuries this season. Never bad to add and stack talent. I've got a lot of faith in Isaiah Gustav. I really liked how he looked at the end of the year. I thought he looked great in practice when we saw him, and was kind of surprised he didn't get more run until the end of the season. I'm very high on Braylon Russell, the freshman that's coming in from Benton High School. But so while I think Jaquindon Jackson is an excellent piece, and there's a good chance he could be a starter, he's going to play a role. He's a more physical, I think, bigger back than maybe some of the other guys that they have. I've seen videos of him excelling in pass blocking. That's something that any offensive coach will appreciate. But yeah, Anton, if he can free up Landon and not get double teamed every single time he's rushing the passer, an automatic win for Deke Adams. And he continues to recruit the portal really well. He continues to recruit the high school ranks really well, with Charleston Collins coming in and Kavion Henderson this year. So well done to Sam Pittman and them. I think I still think they need a couple offensive linemen, at least one. I personally think that they could use with another wide receiver. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, though, with picking up, Mr. Anthony from Texas A&M last week. I would love to see them get a wide receiver with more production, more established production in college football. Not sure if that'll happen. We'll wait and see. They need a linebacker, but Hutch, what do you think? I know I might have just said every position that they need, but what's the biggest need that you think the Hogs still have in the transfer portal?
You kind of touched on it there at the end. Linebacker, I think, is where you've got to address it. It would be nice to add a veteran, experienced, wide receiver. I mean, if you could get, he's not in the picture, whatever. I know a lot of Arkansas fans looked at Evan Stewart just because he played at Texas A&M and tweeted some nice things about Bobby Petrino, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, he'll come here now that Petrino's here." Well, it's still Arkansas, and he's a 5-star guy. It's going to be pursued by everyone, and I think he's looking at Oregon, Ohio State, schools like that. Not going to be in the picture for a guy like him. But if you could find someone like him, you would take him. But right now, I mean, just from a numbers perspective, assuming Tyrone Broden is coming back for his super senior season, which I don't think he's officially announced, but I think he's kind of hinted at it, I think you're at 11 scholarship wide receivers. That's a pretty big number from just a numbers perspective. So if you did bring someone in, you might have to push somebody out. And honestly, you might see somebody leave already with the 11 guys that they've got. So I think they're probably going to stand pat at wide receiver, just kind of what I think they're going to do. But linebacker, they need some more veteran, experienced guys to go back there, since they did lose. I mean, they lose Jaheim Thomas, they lose Pooh Paul, they lose Jordan Crook. Antonio Greer was out of eligibility. That's a big hit. And you're also assuming Xavier Sorey from Georgia is going to be like a Drew Sanders and be a guy that didn't play a whole lot at a premier school, comes here and is a starter and an All-American. Maybe that happens, but if it doesn't, you really need somebody else there to also be ready to contribute. Otherwise, you're going to really be relying on those freshmen that you brought in, who, granted, are very touted, highly recruited freshmen, but still freshmen nonetheless in the SEC.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Actually, I think you make a great point with the amount of wide receivers that they have. I think they're not going to. How do I say this? They're not going to take another Jordan Anthony, like a guy with high upside that hasn't produced, because they've got enough of those guys already in the building. But if someone comes along, not Evan Stewart, but like an Evan Stewart that you've seen bona fide production out of and wants to jump into the program, I think they got to take him, because I have said this, I've beaten this drum since last football season. I don't think that wide receiver room is as good as people have made it out to be. We'll see next year if the offensive line improves and the running game improves and that opens things up, maybe I'm wrong on that. But I think the wide receivers played a part in the offense struggling last year. Just you go from, Hazelwood and Landers and Treylon Burks to what they had last year. That's a huge step down. So, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am wrong because that means Arkansas is going to have a better season next year. Hutch, I got great news for you, man. Absolutely terrific news for you. Growing up in the mountains of North Carolina, my old high school baseball coach used to always say the first sight of snow was the first sight of baseball season. And guess what? We saw some snow this week in Northwest Arkansas, so we have our first college baseball preseason rankings. Amazing how it works out like that. PerfectGame.com has Arkansas number 2 in the country, behind only Wake Forest. Hagen Smith was also named a preseason first-team All-American, talented left-handed pitcher who figures to be their Friday starter this year. This is going to be my first season covering the Arkansas baseball team. So, Hutch, what's the level of optimism like this year compared to previous teams? Is there any heightened hype, or are these preseason rankings just kind of ho-hum with how good the program has been?
I'd say the preseason rankings are kind of ho-hum. I mean, it's kind of crazy to say that about a number 2 ranking, but that's kind of where Arkansas is right now, just as a program. But I do think there are pretty high expectations. But honestly, you could go back to 2018, starting then. So over the last 5 to 6 years, they've been at this level. I mean, the expectations are you're going to make it to Omaha and you're going to compete for a national championship, which national championship is the only thing Dave Van Horn hasn't accomplished. And I still believe it's going to happen at some point. Maybe it's this year, maybe it's not. But I think that's kind of the expectation of the fans is they're going to be really good. And I think they're tired of hearing us talk about it, but I'm going to do it anyways because they're like, oh, well, I want to see it on the field. Because we've said before, like, last year's pitching staff should have been one of the better ones Dave Van Horn's ever had. And I still believe it would have been, but that's what happens when Jackson Wiggins goes down for the season before the year. You have Brady Tiger get hurt early on. You lose all these other pitchers that get hurt, and you're like, suddenly, okay, well, now they're not as good. Well, obviously, because you lose your better pitchers to injury. And that's why I say this year, if they stay healthy, this could be the most dominant pitching staff Dave Van Horn has ever had. And that's saying something because he's had some damn good pitching staffs over the years. And I mean, we're talking from the rotation to the bullpen. Hagen Smith at the top of that, preseason first team All-American. I buy into that wholeheartedly. I think he's going to be really, really good. I had an opportunity to talk to Matt Hobbs, the pitching coach, one-on-one after the fall ball, and he spoke very highly of Hagen Smith. I know everyone gets kind of caught up on the fact that he's touched 100 miles an hour this fall, which is great. 100 miles an hour, fantastic. But you can throw hard and not be any good. And he throws hard. He's worked on his fastball commands. That's probably the biggest issue for him over the last couple of years is he does walk too many guys, and it doesn't enable him to go deeper into games because his pitch count gets up. He's improved that based on what Matt Hobbs told me, and he's also added a splitter. And so that gives him 4 legitimate pitches. And if you're a starter with 4 legitimate pitches and you can command the fastball like he supposedly can now, that's setting up to be a first-team All-American type of pitcher, a dominant ace, a top 15 MLB draft pick like he's being currently projected by multiple mock drafts. So the expectations are really, really high in that building, not just from the fans, but in that building, they think they have a really, really good team. And that's not even talking about what they've got in the field, which, is crazy depth as well, as we've talked, off this podcast before. So I'm very, very excited for the baseball season to get here because I think they're going to be right in the thick of it.
From an outsider's perspective, it seems like everything you say about Hagen is just enough reason for optimism with the pitching staff. Mason Molina, I think, is going to be really good. He had a great year at Texas Tech last year, and coming over now to Arkansas, I mean, if he's either going to be the number 2 or the number 3. I mean, if he's the number 3, that's got to be one of the best number 3s in the entire country. My only concern is, and okay, again, an outsider's perspective, I haven't watched a single meaningful game of Arkansas baseball. All I'm doing is, the couple times I went out this fall and looking at the stats and how they performed last year. There are some guys that I look at, how they've performed at the plate, and I think that maybe there's a little heightened level of optimism that I don't personally see. I know Kendall Diggs is that guy, that dude, but there's some other guys, like Jason Jones, the Wilmsmeyer guy from Missouri, some guys that have loads of potential, but they have to kind of take that step up compared to what they've done in previous years. And from everything I've heard, it seems like Dave Van Horn and his staff has the ability to do that kind of development to get these guys as they become older and older in college baseball better and better. But I'm being a little cautious because of how poorly the football season and basketball season have gone in my first year on the beat. But I'm very, very, very hopeful that this baseball team turns out to be a national power this year and makes a deep run. Making a trip to Omaha in June to cover them would be fantastic. All right, and I don't think I mentioned this. At 8 SEC teams in that top 25. So it's going to be another thrilling year in the league and a really fun time over at Baum-Walker Stadium with all the talent coming to Fayetteville this spring. Let's close things up. What the Hog, our weekly segment where I share the craziest thing I've seen from Arkansas Twitter each week. This week was very easy. Eric Musselman, fire Eric Musselman. Guys, stop. He's allowed to have a down year. I'm a North Carolina guy. Hubert Davis led North Carolina to the national championship game in his first year. The next year they didn't even make the tournament. Look what they are now, top 10 team in the country. These college basketball, the way it's going, I think these down years are going to happen more often because of all the turnover within each program and the transfer portal. You might take some swings and you might take some misses in the transfer portal. It seems that might have happened for Coach Muss this year. It's fine. He's clearly one of the best tactical college basketball coaches in the country. All preseason, we heard all the love and praise from the players about what he does for them in terms of their development and winning. He's a respected, terrific coach. We can question some of the decisions he's made this year. Fire Eric Musselman. Get out of here, Arkansas Twitter. He's staying next year. He should, I think he might even have, he should maybe have 2 or 3 years of goodwill. What do you think about my assessment there on all that?
I mean, they should have fired him at halftime of the Auburn game, to be quite honest. I mean, no, you're spot on. I mean, Eric Musselman is a tremendous coach. I mean, look at what the program was before he got here. Arkansas went 25 years without making the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. 25 years at a program like Arkansas.
It's insane.
That was a national powerhouse. Arkansas in the 90s was up there with the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the Kentuckys. I mean, they were that level. And Eric Musselman has slowly got them up there. And I mean, and I say slowly, honestly, very quickly, year 2 to the Elite Eight, then Elite Eight again, and then the Sweet 16, despite having just kind of a mediocre regular season. So I think what he's done is earned him some slack. If it's a down year and they only make the NIT this year, oh well. Eric Musselman's not going to just suddenly stop coaching or stop trying. I mean, honestly, if they make the NIT this year, that might light a fire under him and get him to where next year is even better than we could have hoped this year would have been. So that's kind of how I stand on Eric Musselman, is just let the man do his thing, because he's proven he knows what he's doing.
I don't know if it's possible to light a fire under Eric Musselman. It's just perpetual flames down there. It's can we get the flames higher, pour some oil on it and get it going. So, all right, man, that was another fun episode. Only number 2, hopefully number 2 of many more. Hutch, tell the listeners again where they can find you on social media and where they can read your work.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at NWA Hutch. You can find me there. You can also read my work at Best of Arkansas Sports. As I've said before, best thing about our site is that it is 100% free with no paywall. So come on out. We try to cover all 3 major sports as best we can at bestofarkansassports.com.
Awesome. And you can find me, everybody, on Twitter/X at JacksonFuller16. Read all my stuff on swtimes.com. That's the Fort Smith Southwest Times, part of the USA Today network. And if there are any interested businesses sponsoring this podcast, or if anyone wants to get involved in any way, please reach out to either myself or Hutch. We'll be back for our third episode on Monday, January 15th. Arkansas has 2 key road games coming up against Georgia and Florida. Of course, we didn't really talk too much about those games, but I think rightfully so, the Auburn result was the main focus of the basketball team this week. So looking forward to seeing how they fare on the road in the SEC, and we'll have it all covered for you on the next episode of Hoggin the Mic. Hutch, have a great week, and I'll see you soon.
Look forward to it.